Fire Emblem has a lot of iconic villains. From Sombron, the antagonist of the latest title, Grima, the nemesis that takes your form in Awakening, and the Black Knight who hunts you down invincible in Path of Radiance, there are plenty of main villains or secondary villains that immediately come to mind when you hear the phrase Fire Emblem antagonist. But to my mind, the difference between a good cast of villains and a great one is the presence of iconic minor villains. People who don't play a big role but nonetheless leave an impression. Costa from Path of Radiance complaining about not having baby hostages, Narshan from the Binding Blade constantly fleeing from you, and of course the subject of today's America-themed video, Kemph, the man with the most punchable face in Thracia 776. We first encounter Kemph in Chapter 11, Fort Dundrum, where he is commanding the squad guarding the aforementioned fort. At the start of the chapter, Olwen and Alfred return from scouting duty to report to Kemph that General Largo is under attack and needs some reinforcements. However, the cowardly commander refuses to assist his allies, stating that they need to keep their forces at Fort Dundrum in order to protect the border from whatever force is advancing. He uses the fort's defensive position as an excuse for inaction, but in reality, it is very clear that he just does not care enough about Largo to risk either his neck or his status trying to save the man. He does, however, use this whole situation as an opportunity to extract a personal grudge. You see, we the player have been made aware of the fact that he is jealous of Reinhardt, who happens to be Olwen's older brother, and Olwen is a soldier under his command. He presses Olwen for information on the force attacking Largo, and when she reveals that she doesn't have all of the exact details, he criticizes her and tries to goad her into some sort of action that can be punished. Initially, the Dire Thunder girl shows restraint, but then Kemph starts insulting Reinhardt, and this causes Olwen to draw her blade on him. For the crime of threatening a superior officer, Kemph has Olwen thrown in the dungeon. His hope is that he can take advantage of this blunder to have Olwen executed and, if he really presses his luck, have Reinhardt stripped of his title. Despite the fact that he's only been on screen for about 5 minutes, we already have a great idea of how Reinhardt works as a character. He is a petty schemer who doesn't actually care about the ongoing conflict, but instead seeks to use it to settle personal grudges and potentially move his social status up. Corrupt nobles are a dime a dozen in Judd Girl, but Kemph feels so much worse, as almost every action he takes is part of some underhanded scheme or another. Even the ways in which he defends Fort Dundrum are dishonorable. He initially has some of his men bait Leif's forces into the courtyard before ambushing him with ballistas. These soldiers are basically intended to be sacrificial cannon fodder, and one of them is Alfred, who's only playing the part of cannon fodder because Kemph has threatened to execute Olwen if Alfred does not comply. This in and of itself is pretty shitty, but we the player know that regardless of what Alfred does, Kemph is planning on having Olwen executed because that is a necessary step in his 5D chess plan to take down Reinhardt. Eventually, Alfred relents, refusing to take place in such cowardly tactics anymore, and Leif's group punches through the fort, gets to the throne room, and confronts Kemph, who immediately retreats after a single round of combat. The way this is executed mechanically is Kemph is given the same skill that Avel and Tanya have, wherein he is unable to die, and instead any attack that would deal lethal damage automatically misses. Once at least one of your units has attacked him, the next enemy phase will start with Kemph declaring that he must get out of here, and he warps away. Little coward that he is. On the way out the door, he makes sure to order that Olwen and several child prisoners are executed, as well as once again instructing his men in a suicide tactic, saying that they need to attack Leif from the murder holes, which will leave them exposed to any archers or mages to immediately kill them. The boss of the chapter, Bishop Oltoff, actually calls Kemph out on this, but Kemph reminds him that anyone who refuses orders of the superior is also going to be executed for treason. So it's a real catch-22 situation. and they might as well fight Leaf because they have a chance of surviving that, as opposed to Execution, where there is zero chance of survival. But perhaps my favorite thing about Kempf is that he's not nearly as good a master manipulator as he sees himself. The next time that we encounter the iconic American villain, he is in some hot water with his superiors for abandoning his post like a little coward baby. As much as he tries to blame the failures on Olwen and Alfred, no one is buying that. It is clear that the blame lies squarely at his feet. And in a classic example of contrapasso, Brooke is using Kempf as bait to lure Leaf's army into the ballistas. Sound familiar? Because Brooke is actually a competent tactician, unlike Bandit Keith, the ballistas are laid out in such a way that if Leaf's army rushes in to deal with Kempf's squad, then they are going to get mowed down. But if they take things slowly, Conomore will come in from behind and pincer attack them, leading to certain demise. Ever the self-centered egomaniac, Kempf is not all that happy about the idea of Conomore getting the glory. But he agrees to stay still because charging outside of ballista range would not only be suicidal on the battlefield, but likely lead to his execution even if he remained victorious. But recognizing how hot-headed her former commanding officer is, Olwen suggests personally goading him out of position, and is able to do just that. So in yet another ironic twist of fate, she does to Kempf exactly what he did to her, baiting him into losing his cool, and it results in his death. While it is a little bit disappointing that the culmination of Kempf's story arc is locked to only one of two possible route choices, personally, I like to imagine that if the player goes B route, he is executed off-screen, due to, once again, not being the master manipulator he sees himself as. Bro thinks he's playing Game of Thrones when realistically he's playing poker and there is a mirror right behind his seat. I hope you enjoyed this July 4th special video. If you did, I would really appreciate you clicking the like button and subscribing if you're interested in seeing what else I've got coming down the line. I think that the story and character of Fire Emblem is an aspect that we often overlook, especially when it comes to the more minor characters. And while Kempf isn't exactly the deepest character out there, he does contain more depth than Brigand Boss number 47, and to my mind is a much more interesting repeating villain than the Four Hounds or Jaritza or insert any I must retreat here. The fact that his retreating is treated like the exception rather than the rule, and is acknowledged in-universe as cowardly and punishable, is kind of awesome to me, and I wish Fire Emblem would go back to this type of minor villain. Regardless, I hope y'all have a wonderful day. If you celebrate it, happy Independence Day. If not, just have a good Tuesday. Stay safe, gamers. Bye-bye.